Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Gosh, you're all very early. Hello, Christiana. Hello, Richard. Hello, Katerina. And Evantia. Wonderful. So everyone is there.
Gosh.
Would you like to, since we have 15 minutes, would you like to try sharing your screen just to see if you can do it? Katerina, would you like to start?
Sure.
Good morning, Katerina.
Hello. Can you see my screen?
Yep. Perfect.
Okay. I'll stop sharing.
Perfect.
Evantia, do you want to try?
Yes, just a second. Okay. Here's my presentation. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Super. Yeah, that worked. And Christiana?
Yep, I'm trying. Okay. Okay, let's see if it works. So can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Excellent.
so this is just the presentation. Okay.
Fantastic. Okay. Brilliant. Richard, I will be hearing. I'm not going to appear on the screen, and
Okay.
I'll let you moderate the session. You know, the questions, as you know, are on the right hand side in the chat.
Yeah, I'll click on chat now, Antonella, just to see what happens. So nothing there at the moment. Yeah, I'll do my best with that, but you'll step in and help me out if I get lost. Most important, I need all of the presenters to make sure that I get their pronunciation of their names correct. So I think I'm okay with Christiana. That's Christiana Roffi. How's that?
Perfect.
All right. Hello, Christiana.
Hi.
Hi. Now, is it Evanthia?
Yes.
Evanthia. Okay. Now I need your surname, Evanthia. Can you pronounce that?
Gildirim. It's a bit difficult. You can pronounce it like in Turkish, Gildirim.
Yeah.
Like,
okay. Giltirim. Where's the emphasis? Where's
it's good. Gildirim.
Gildirim?
Yes.
Gildirim.
Yes.
Will that do?
Yeah. I'm sorry about it. It's like,
no, apologies in advance if it sounds peculiar, but I'll do my best anyway. Gildirim. Right. I think we're okay with Caterina Schiappatori. Is that all right?
That's excellent.
All right. And where's Tony? Haven't seen him.
Here. Hello.
Oh, hi, Tony. Tony,
hello.
how's your surname? Saarinen?
Yep, that sounds, right.
Right, thank you.
Sorry, Tony, I didn't see you before. Did you also want to try and share your screen just to make sure that everything's okay?
Yeah, sure. I just joined the meeting, but I can try. I already tested it a couple of times and it should work, but let's see. So here's the presentation.
Perfect.
Is it okay?
Very good.
So it was okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, great. Now I just need to find a way to stop it easily. Oh, yeah.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah. Where are you, Tony? Are you in Helsinki?
Yep.
What's the weather like?
It's pretty good. There's some sun out there right now.
Yeah.
Well, it's been really like gloomy for the past 3 days or something. So
Yeah.
this is a moment of beauty here.
Our home is on the sea, so if I turn the computer around, you'd see water outside. But I don't want to disconnect the computer and risk that. But so if it gets a bit windy and stormy, then I just have to apologise. But the weather forecast isn't very good. And Evanthea and Katerina, you're both in Athens, are you?
Yes,
Yes.
Keeping healthy?
we're trying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And Christiana, where are you?
Italy. So in a city near Milan, so in the north of Italy.
I know where the north of Italy is.
Yeah, of course, but maybe not the city.
Which one?
Cremona.
Yes, lucky you, yeah. And are you keeping free of the virus up there?
Yeah, I have to say that here in the north of Italy, the situation with coronavirus is just quite challenging. So we
Yeah.
had a lot of problems in the past month, and now I'm not
Yeah.
sure that everything is going well because, yeah, you know.
Okay, well, for your presentation, in bocca al lupo.
Crepi. Thank you.
Esatto. Right. And what are things, are you keeping your head above water, Antonella, then? There,
Yes, absolutely, Richard. Thank you. Yes, now
doing
we
a
are
great job.
day 3. So yes, looking good. Everything has gone quite smoothly. I have to say.
Yeah.
I don't know
You're
if you
getting some sleep occasionally?
occasionally. Have you? I think I saw you joining in a few of our sessions. I don't know if the other participants, the other speakers, have you managed to join in and listen to other presentations?
Yeah, we have. Yes, certainly we have now and again. Yeah, we've listened to some Spanish, listened to some English, and a mixture. Yeah, fine.
Fantastic. Do you follow it on Facebook? Is anyone of you following it on Facebook or YouTube?
Method is on Facebook. I'm not on any of these modern media. I just live in the past.
Oh.
But yeah, Method is.
I think I found something, but then I don't know because I'm very new in this.
She's new in Facebook, you see.
So I found a photo. Enrique put a photo.
Yeah.
I saw that, and but I haven't followed it. And Asun yesterday also. She
Yeah.
was. I saw that she was. I haven't seen mine.
We listened to Luisa's plenary lecture, but there was a bit of problem with the sound because we lost it for about 10 minutes, I think 15 minutes. It didn't come through. Yeah, online. Couldn't hear a thing for part of the lecture, which was a pity.
You followed it live, or did you?
Live.
Oh, I see. Well, we had a few problems, a few issues. I also followed it online. There was a problem in the faculty of internet connection, apparently. So it was interrupted a couple of times, but it didn't seem that long. And then Luis managed to, to go back and to follow what he was saying. But I mean, what can you do?
Oh, no, well, these things happen.
These things happen. We had one participant who wasn't able yesterday to connect from Kazakhstan, and today she managed to join in this morning. So we have to just improvise a little bit and just make make the best. So we're still 5 minutes to go. And soon I will receive a message from Adrian saying that we will be live on Facebook. And anything, I'm here to.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll just start out with a couple of things. I'll
Sure.
obviously say we have to respect time. You all know that anyway, but I just say that for the benefit of the audience, really. And I'll say a word about chat as well. I'm going to suggest that people try and be sensible about what they put up for chat. I mean, you can't answer the meaning of the universe in the chat. You have to be sensible of the kind of things you post. So I'll say that just for half a minute, and then over to Evanthea for to kick off.
Yeah.
Exactly. One last little detail when you give your presentations, if all the others could put the microphone on silence, so not to disrupt the presentation. That's the only small detail.
Yeah. Do we go off video as well, Antonella, during the presentation?
Sorry, do you?
Do we for instance, do I cut out my video as well as?
You do as you like. You do as you like. You can. Yeah. I don't know. In the last session, everyone went off.
Yeah, I think it's confusing for the speaker to see.
Maybe.
To see an ugly face from England, so I can delete that.
It's not at all an ugly face. So we don't have any spectators for the moment, but that's I think it's because we're not live yet.
Well, we can just talk among ourselves in that case. Why not?
I will just check if Adrian. Right. Okay, so Adrian has just given me the link to do it on Facebook, to record on Facebook. If we are all ready, we can start, Richard.
Yeah, perfect. Good. Okay, my name is Richard Buxton. I've got the privilege and pleasure of moderating this session of what will surely be 4 fascinating presentations. The conference organisers have made it very clear to moderators that we have to be strict about time limits. 20 minutes and no more for each speaker, followed by 10 minutes for each speaker of questions based on comments through chat. If a speaker goes beyond their 20 minutes, which I'm sure they won't, then I'd have to step in and politely ask them to come to an end. As to the chat, do think before you post a chat. A chat should be concise and realistic, it seems to me. Concise is self-evident, but by realistic, I mean, think what a speaker can reasonably answer in 1 or 2 minutes. A highly complicated chat, which takes half an hour to understand, or a very general chat that takes half an hour to answer, isn't going to be helpful to the discussion. So be concise and realistic. And that's how we'll be fair to our speakers, which is what we want to do. So to our first speaker, who is Evanthea Gilkirim, a postgraduate student in comparative literature in the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. She's also been an exchange student at the University of Minho in Braga. Her academic interests revolve around queer theory, feminism, creative writing, and postmodern myth-making practices as sites of socio-political advocacy and reflection. And the title is Romanticizing Science Fiction, Dreaming of Prometheus and Artificial Morality in Jeanette Winterson's Frankenstein. So over to Evanthea.
First of all, I would like to thank you, Professor Buxton, and the organizing committee for offering me the opportunity to present my paper here. And now I will share my screen with you, and I will start immediately with my presentation. Taking into account the immense influence of Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus in literary tradition and popular culture alike, one could argue that Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley's first work proves that nothing is more alive than dead matter. Indeed, coming from one of the few female authors allowed into the canon, this horrific tale still fascinates and inspires its readers almost 200 years after its initial publication. Attesting to this truth, Jeanette Winterson's Frankenstein, a love story, could be regarded as a genuine attempt to trace a new relationship between creator and creation. Structured as a double narrative, which on one level tells the story behind the birth of Shelley's novel, and on another is staged in a post-Brexit Britain, Winterson's retelling could be viewed as a romance articulating humanity's hopeless love with two contradictory visions, immortality and progress. Bearing this in mind, this presentation will examine Frankenstein as a scientific romance establishing a fruitful dialogue between ancient Greek myth and post-human realities. More specifically, by focusing on the main characters of the novel, I will explore the convergence of two mythical cases of masculine procreation, Pygmalion and Prometheus, as embodied in the characters of Ron Lord and Victor Stein, respectively. Within this context, Stein will emerge as a shattered Promethean figure obsessed with AI technologies, while Lord will be seen as a contemporary Pygmalion possessing an army of AI sex-bot Galactias. Unlike his mythical predecessor, Stein's alliance with the ontological gods of Western tradition will not only render him a hollow benefactor of humanity, but also deprive him of any possibility of future salvation. In contrast to this idealistic standpoint, Lord's exploitation of his XX boats will be regarded both as an echo of his Ovidian past, as well as a symptom of transnational capitalism. In addition to this, Ray Shelley, Stein's medical associate and lover, will be placed at the center of this mythic equation as a personification of Don Harvey's definition of a cybernetic organism, a hybrid of machine and organism, a creature of social reality as well as a creature of fiction. In this sense, his liminal body and gender experience will be perceived as a powerful challenge against the image of two godlike creators violating the boundaries between life and death. Like a Rye version of Dr. Frankenstein's infamous creature, Rye will be portrayed as the master and creator of his own cyborg body. Thus breaking a vicious Oedipal cycle reproduced by the masculine-inflected biopolitics of Stein and Lord, this transgender man will rise as a new mythic creature embracing all of humanity's polarities and limitations. Furthermore, by focusing on the importance of the mythological patterns that inform Frankenstein's plot, I will stress the value of myth as a double structure, altogether historical and ahistorical. Within this framework, Prometheus' story will be studied not only as a cosmogonic tale, but also as a powerful tool in the course of understanding the post-human condition. Indeed, the very title of Winterson's source, Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, immediately evokes the spirit of this mythic titan. Essentially a trickster in the service of humanity, this immortal hero is cleverly modernized, alluding both to Mary Shelley's ingenious Dr. Frankenstein, as well as to his artificial child. Under this light, rather than a mere symbol of his master's transgression, this being of gigantic stature is elevated into a rebellious hero, an artificial and Prometheus-like romantic Caliban challenging the authority of his own creator. Probably inspired by this double reading, Winterson furtherly explores this intellectual kinship by connecting the characters of your novel with the keys. Hence, simultaneously inseparable from and opposite to each other, Victor and Rai articulate a long-lost Promethean dream that can easily turn into a nightmare. Now locating the earliest accounts of the Titan's life in Hesiod's Theogony and Woxen days, one cannot help but admire his cunning manners and witty mind as he manages to deceive Zeus not only once, but twice. After ensuring that the best parts of sacrificial meat will be consumed by humans, and subsequently offering them the precious gift of fire, he surely acquires a special status as humanity's protector. Like a typical myth of creation, though, Prometheus' story also contains a warning as his defiance against the gods is severely punished. Chained upon a rock, he undergoes a moral transfiguration while suffering the attacks of a monstrous eagle. Sent by Zeus, this bird consumed the hero's immortal liver, which constantly regenerates, prolonging his torture. Thus, moving from a comic to a tragic representation in Aeschylus's Prometheus Bound, his character's Protean quality is eventually sealed in Metamorphosis. There, his portrayal as the sculpture of the human race transforms him into a signifier who signified steam to shift again and again, according to Bretton Rogers. Whether perforce or plasticator, Prometheus occupies the center of both Mary Shelley's and Jeanette Winterson's narratives. Echoing the name and genius of his Gothic predecessor, Victor Stein is introduced to the readers as a well-preserved man in his 50s. Being a renowned professor, he barely reminds the unstable figure of Dr. Frankenstein, whose efforts to create a new mode of life were pursued in utmost secrecy. Instead, leading a public debate regarding the future possibilities of an artificially intelligent world, he is described by Rai as a gospel channel scientist. Possessing an army of followers on Facebook and Twitter, this post-human titan of science is already worshipped by some and criticized by others. Rather than bringing the light of knowledge to humanity, Stein is paradoxically placed in the spotlight of future developments. Based on a scale of YouTube views, his scientific accountability ultimately challenges the view of man as the measure of all things, as he states. The world that AI will make possible will not be a world of labels, and that includes binaries like male and female, black and white, rich and poor. There will not be a division between head and heart, between what I feel and what I think. The future will not be a version of Blade Runner where replicants long to be named like humans and therefore to be known like humans. Quite ironically, this statement establishes a link between Stein's future and ancient Greek past as described by Plato in Protagoras. In this account of the myth, Prometheus is called to name all living beings as well as to correct his brother's careless distribution of natural gifts among them. Lacking foresight, Epimetheus leaves humans completely naked, hence forcing his brother to ensure their protection by committing his famous theft of fire. Interestingly, taxonomy plays an equally important role for Victor Stein, whose dream echoes Donna Haraway's vision of a world of anonymity and equality. However, Stein fails to see that the progress he strives for could never be sustained unless rooted in the values of justice and reverence. Thus, while he strongly believes that the use of wrong names increases the misfortune of the world, brings him closer to his Promethean archetype, it comes in total opposition to Haraway's warning against a perfectly faithful naming of experience as a totalizing and imperialist mode of expression. Consequently, both immoral and regressive, scientific knowledge and computer science could never be used in order to produce any positive results. Moreover, his private experiments with mutilated body parts not only allude to the Etruscan illustrations of Prometheus as a sculptor constructing human statues, but also reveal a great deal about his volatile ethics. Essentially seen as a collection of limbs and organs, human bodies resemble Deucalion and Pyrrhus' mythic children, growing out of stone after a destructive flood sent by the gods. Thus, like men and women whose hearts and lives turned out to be as hard as the material from which they were formed, humans appear to be not the best possible outcome for Stein. In addition to this, the professor's perception of Rye as a zero probability, along with his self-serving alliance with Ron Lord, further proved his inability to function outside the binary system. Failing to solve the problems of his immediate reality, Stein ultimately assumed the role of an egomaniac idealist, displaying a rather selfish defiance against the gods. On the other side of the spectrum, Ray Shelley's connection to Prometheus will be now traced both in terms of his affinity with Frankenstein's monster, but also in regards to his erotic affair with Stein. Embedded in the very title of Winterson's novel, the romantic element of your story is materialized through a kiss between Frank and Stein. While Stein probably refers to Victor's surname, Frank could be read as a nickname for Mary Shelley's monster that has been often conflated with its creator in popular culture. In fact, this idea is reinforced by the following imaginary dialogue between Percy and Mary Shelley. "No," said Shelley, "for your story is more than the story of one man. There are two who live in each other, do they not? Frankenstein in the monster in Frankenstein?" "They do," I replied, "and therefore the monster has no name, for he has no need for one." Consequently, Frankenstein not only betrays the intellectual affinity between Victor and Rye, but also brings the physical aspect of their relationship in the foreground. As far as Mendelssohn observes, science fiction remains one of the few genres in which intimate relations are marginal. Yet in this novel, physical and cosmic love intertwine. Apart from exploring human fascination with the macrocosm, Winterson's work greatly invests in the homoerotic love affair between Stein and Rye. More than a mere firelighter, this doctor emerges as a true forethinker on the side of humanity. Part of a small group of transgender medical professionals, he identifies himself as a cyborg, being in harmony with his own body, explaining, "I'm a woman and I'm a man. That's how it is for me. I'm in the body I prefer, but the past, my past, isn't subject to surgery. I didn't do it to distance myself from myself. I did it to get nearer to myself." In this respect, resembling the Aeschylean version of Prometheus, Rye is elevated into a biological rebel struggling against the currents of society's heteronormative expectations. More than a reckless titan, this transgender man, cherishing his literal and metaphorical scars, bears a clear understanding of life as intrinsically connected to materiality. Being the master and creator of his body, he does not merely counter his lover's destructive post-human views, but also offers a viable alternative born out of his own flesh and blood. Rather than a dream of common language, Rye's physique articulates a powerful infidel heteroglossia, indicating that humanity's salvation should be first and foremost grounded on the disruption of artificial boundaries like gender, race, and class. However, before moving into a closer analysis of Rye's cyborg identity, we need to discuss how the myth of Pygmalion informs the character of Ron Lord in Frankenstein. Originally based on the story of a Cyprian king who fell in love with a statue of Aphrodite, this tale has been transmitted to popular culture through its Ovidian adaptation in Metamorphoses. In fact, this subsequent portrayal of Pygmalion as a sculptor able to mold and bring into life his ideal woman has turned him into an archetype for the archetypal image, of the male creator and lover. Instead of a masculine-centered romantic narrative, though, this myth could also be viewed as an unsettling description of the best female android sex partners in Western history, as Adrian Mayer observes. Adding to this, the examination of ancient Greek statues as sites of fetishism, we can fully grasp the significance behind the construction of Lord's character after Pygmalion. Recently divorced and living with his mother, Lord is depicted as a simple-minded entrepreneur owning an XX vote franchise company. Instantly branded as a misogynist, he does not merely reflect Pygmalion's revulsion towards the loose morals of the female sex, but is also linked with Stein as a man in the service of humankind. Like the wanton Procotides in Ovid's narrative, women for Lord become the flesh-made projection of his own emotional disillusionment and fear of castration. Thus, deprived of the companionship of married love, this man is inspired to create an army of snow-white partners, offering their services to lonely men like himself. Of course, his company is largely sustained by the assistance of his mom, who, like another Aphrodite, breathes life into her son's business in a world of cheap female labor. Curiously enough, Lord's approach to naming establishes another link between him and Stein. As while his name evokes the image of a godlike creator, it also undermines its value by exposing his inability to properly classify his own creation, much like the Greek gods in Plato's Protagoras. Except from his first sex god, Claire, the rest of his genoids remain nameless, while Lord explains to Rai, I made the decision not to give my girls names. It's like those very fancy paints that use numbers, because what a color means to you, because what a color means to me wouldn't be what a color means to you, and you might be colorblind anyway. Hence, generally taxonomized as economy, racy, and deluxe, Lord's oversized Barbies merely retain the functional purity of Pygmalion's first ivory partner. Originally fashioned by Ovid as a nameless creature, this artificial female became widely known as Galatea, adopting a name proposed by Rousseau in 1770. Thus, reflecting the milk-white purity Galatea's name etymologically implies, Lord's economy models not only expose their creator as a mock artist, but also reveal his loose morals, especially during his interactions with Rai. More specifically, Lord's rude reaction upon the discovery of Rai's transgender identity entails a double meaning. On the one hand, it betrays his fixation with patriarchal dichotomies, while on the other hand, validates his mythological origins as an all-powerful creator that cannot fathom a Galatea who has escaped her destiny. In this sense, refusing to understand how Rai is used as a short for Mary, he repeatedly misgenders the doctor, basing his attacks upon heteronormative biological preconceptions. That's what all men want, says Ron. Not all men, says Victor. It's not what I want, I say. And Ron looks at me with even more doubt and even more dismay. Listen, Ryan, or Mary, or whatever your name is, I'm not being personal, but you got a dick? No, I say, my name is Rai, and I don't have a dick. Is manhood dickhood? I ask Ron. It seems then that Rai's verbal assertion in this passage signals the birth of a new mythological identity that powerfully challenges biological norms and classification. Going against Stein's and Lord's post-human visions, Rai's ability to recognize and correct the deficiencies of an imperfect nature turns him into the author of his own destiny. As a former female agent, he thus stands as a composite of the mythic male creator, as well as his artificial, explicitly female creation. Literally an emancipated version of Galatea or even Pandora, Rai breaks physiological the physiological mold of womanhood, reclaiming the mastery of his own body and pleasure. While Matthew Gambard links Frankenstein's creature with Pandora as superlative artifacts, rather than objectified, Rice modified biology negotiates the relationship between authority and subjectivity. In this sense, future early and at ease with the corporeal aspect of himself, Rice defies two mythological perceptions of femininity as either dumb or evil. Thus, rather than yielding beneath the fingers of Stein and Lord, his king becomes an enigma that no Turing test could ever hope to decipher. Identifying as liminal, casping, transitional, or even experimental, he exemplifies how a cybernetic organism can be read as a kalon kakon in a post-human environment. Running on feelings instead of binaries, Rai quietly exits the novel thinking. Here I am, anonymous, unnoticed, walking through the streets, and I'm present and invisible. The riot in my head is unseen, and if my heart is broken, it keeps beating. That is the strangeness of life. In this manner, his final separation with Stein destroys any possibility of a cruel victory that their union could entail. Instead of a defeat, though, his unspoken words not only allude to the quiet thoughtfulness of the mythical female, but also mark his entrance in a new mythic era, a post-human world of uncertainty, but truly filled with emotion. Thank you.
And thank you for that elegant and very well-informed paper. Thank you very much, Evanthea. Let's have a look at the chat. Now, this is where I need my, nothing so far. I thought you gave a beautiful balancing act between the ancient, oh, Christina Doku, now there's a surprise. Let me chew this. Hang on a minute, let me read this out. You make a good case of how Rai transcends the categories of male and female creation and creator. Is there anything, however, that suggests he is larger than the sum of his parts? Something plus question mark. Okay, best of luck with that, Evanthea.
So I'm not sure whether you mean if he's like larger than the sum of his parts, like resembling Prometheus as a titan, if there is a connection between these. But there is like this motive in the novel that Ray Shelley is also an incarnation of Mary Shelley. And Victor Stein is an incarnation of Dr. Frankenstein and Prometheus at the same time. So the heroes seem to live past their lives and meet again and again. Like this is the final hint because they meet again. So I'm not sure if I covered your question, but I think that's what makes both of them larger than life, because they come again and again.
So there's a supplementary comment.
There is also this game between the creator and the creation, because Victor is an incarnation of Dr. Frankenstein, but also Percy Shelley, because they have this love affair. And at some point, there is on the first level of the narrative, Dr. Frankenstein actually really comes to life, and he wonders whether he's the creator or the creation. So they're both at the same time. That's why they are both Prometheuses in the story.
Sounds pretty good to me. Well done. Good answer, I think. Any more chats? Come on, it's blank at the moment. Well, it's a very sophisticated paper. I can't believe that out there in cyberspace there aren't some more thoughtful questions waiting to be put. You've got about 5 minutes to do that. Okay, let me fill in, Evanthea. How widespread is the use of classical Greek models or their reception in Jeanette Winterson's other work? I'm pretty ignorant about that. You obviously know it backwards. So can you just illuminate me?
Yeah, actually, she's pretty interested in myth in general. She usually works with biblical myth because she knows a lot about the biblical stories and stuff. And because she's writing queer stories, she plays with these myths and she informs them. But she also uses Greek myth, like in shorter narratives within her stories. And she has also written an extensive retelling of Atlas. The novel is called The Weight, and it's about Atlas holding the world, but it's a different kind of perception, a different point of view, because he's more humane in her story.
Mm.
She likes to do this with me.
Sorry to interrupt. There's another chat just come up. Metka makes this comment, as she says, more of a comment than a question. In the Mary Shelley movie, the poet, after reading the novel his wife wrote, recognizes her immense suffering and realizes that he is the monster.
Yeah, perhaps Winterson has seen the movie as well, and she has like this idea. But there are also many analyses and readings of Dr. Frankenstein as Percy Shelley. Like there are many critical reviews that see Dr. Frankenstein actually as a hybrid of her father and her husband. So
very good. Any more? A couple more minutes before we. And Metka adds at the end, excellent. I thought it was as well. Yes, so jolly good. All right. Shall we draw a line under that? Thank you once again for that presentation, Evanthea. And you can go and have a coffee, symbolically or really. I'm going to close the chat. And let's move on to our second speaker, which should be Christiana. Yes, Christiana Rothby. There she is. Okay. So Christiana is a former student of the University of Bologna, where in 2015 she was awarded her MA in Classics. She's currently a doctoral student of a joint PhD between the University of Trento and the University of Augsburg, and also a Latin history and Italian language high school teacher. So a busy woman.
Try to.
Yeah, the title is More of Prometheus, From Prometheus to Metropolis, a cinematic development of a classical myth. So over to you, Christiana.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this introduction. I'm starting sharing the screen so you can follow me better. So, okay. Okay, do you see it? Okay, I think that it's working. Okay, so let's start with this presentation. So Loved and Hate, since its 1927 premiere, Fritz Lang Metropolis has inspired as many divergent readings as impassionated responses. The film cannot be approached as a monolith, rather like the myth itself. It remains the product of several influences. Prometheus, the fictional character from which Lang took inspiration, is a complex figure in the ancient literary tradition because of his recurrent prominence over many centuries, beginning with two of the earliest attested literary sources, Hesiodidactic poem, Theogony, and Working Days, as we also said before in the previous presentation. He also stars in the 5th century BC dramatic trilogy, Prometheus Bound, Prometheus Unbound, and Prometheus the Firebringer, often attributed to Aeschylus. Symbol of Western civilization, he was often perceived as a philanthropist, as he elevates humanity above the condition of beasts and on the other side, as the main and only responsible for the loss of the initial state of grace, a rebellious Lucifer of sorts. For Marx, he was the first martyr of humanity. For Nietzsche, the incarnation of the Aryan spirit, the icon of a conquered freedom through the teaching of technology represented by the gift of fire. Prometheus is present in Goethe writings, especially Faust, as embodying the conflict between gods and men, being familiar figure to both Fritz Lang and Thea von Harbour, the film screenwriter and also Lang's wife. During his early education, Lang read Goethe and was so obsessed with the author that would still quote him in interviews during the 1950s and 1960s. In order to fully understand the real message of this cinematic masterpiece, we need to consider the film and the myth within the historical context of the Weimar era Berlin, the time during which the film was created. In the winter of 1925, unemployment and starvation forced citizens to call Berlin the Babylon of Europe. Metropolis, the largest and most expensive project of German UFA studios, proves Klaus Kaimeyer's idea that, back then, UFA studios were a melting pot for Weimar and both its progressive and regressive elements. Interesting to see that Metropolis was the most expensive European film, and soon after the film premiere, the UFA closed for bankruptcy. Spenger's book Der Untergang des Abendlandes, The Decline of the West, was also trying to explain the downfall of the Western world, which climaxed with the apocalyptic destruction of war, which caused by the supremacy of the machine and the technological spirits. When asked about Metropolis in the 1960s, Lang answered that it was the machine that interested him and not the story ending. In the period between the late 19th and the early 15th century, the representation of cinematic figures did not contrast so much with newspapers and magazine illustration. The content of the story being filmed replicated the time's more recent inventions, such as powerful airplanes, electricity. Not early than the 20s shall we watch with Metropolis, a cinematic representation of an amazing and charming city. During this phase of cinema, the city of the future can only be imagined through some of its buildings. A common feature of architecture in such early stage of film production is its complete automation. The city depicted in Metropolis is bound to affect dystopic urban imaginary up until modern day times. It's an urban space that mirrors social class divisions, highlighting two main factors: the dominant elite living in the skyscrapers and the working class, enslaved by machine and struggling in the very underground world made of catacombs. It's difficult to say whether these images portray a technological utopia or a dystopia. The first sequences where the camera flows between skyscrapers and floating highways echoes Italian futuristic taste. Metropolis comes across as utopia, showing the poetics of futurist machine. It's a dystopian projection where it refers to a society broken down by alienating class divisions. Formally, the megalopolis of the future results from the collision between the opposite poles. The aerial city, dominated by light and the chaotic movement of its inhabitants, and the underground city. The film is also full of reference to architecture. The first source of inspiration is the city of New York, which Lang had visited, and whose skyline had left a trace that could hardly be erased in this imagination, as he film states in the 1926 interview for Cahiers du Cinéma. According to the director's words, the idea from Metropolis was born in 1924, while he and his wife Thea von Harbour arrived in New York by boat with producer Henrik Pommer to sponsor Siegfried, the first part of the Nibelung cycle. The sight of New York by night gave from Harbour inspiration for a science fiction story. The filmmaker himself, amazed at the city view from the Harbour's deck, stated, "I saw a streetlit is in full daylight by neon lights and, topping them, oversized luminous advertisement moving, turning, flashing on and off, spiraling, something that was completely new and nearly fairy tale, like for European in those days. The building seems to be a vertical veil, shimmering, almost weightless, a luxurious cloth hung from the sky to dazzle, distract, and hypnotize. At night, the city did not give the impression of being alive. It lived as illusion lived. I knew that I had to make a film about all of these sensations." The cosmology of Metropolis has many similarities with the Promethean myth. The film opening scene shows an army of faceless factory workers in the depth of the city during their shift change, showing black uniforms and shaved heads. No conversation, no expression, no indication of social interaction can be seen among them. As they descend in the elevator, an intertitle tells us that their realm lays deep inside the earth. In the same way, Prometheus describes humanity in Aeschylus' plays Prometheus Bound. First of all, although they had the power of sight, they looked around in vain. They were able to hear, they did not listen, but as if they were only faint specters, they acted without purpose and confused all things for their entire lives. They live underground, just like burrowing ants in sunless recesses. The opposite pole of the film society depicts worker counterpart. Towering so high over them, as the intertitle says, the Father who have created for their Son the miracle of eternal gardens. When I'm talking about eternal gardens and the Club of the Song, I'm referring to this image. So we have some women in the front, and behind we have the main character, Freder, and another woman. And they spend their weeks, almost a year, during parties with their friends. So the Club of the Sun is represent the Olympus with eternal libation and company. A similar correspondence between the mythical world and the cinematic one is found at the level of the individual characters too. The most important, John Fredersen, tyrannical master of the city, his son Freder, Maria and her robotic copy, Rotvang, the mad scientist. Freder's characters is different from the classical Prometheus and the rebel icons so dear to English romantics. Dominated by his father, he has not a dynamic personality. However, captivated by Maria, he left his opulent kingdom to descend in the underworld, and after witnessing the slavery his father subjected factory workers to, out of sheer philanthropy decided to free them and give them their independence back. Gradually, he became the mediator between the masters and the workers, a sort of messianic figure. Two of the Aeschylus tragedies, Eumenides and Prometheus Unbound, show us the primordial struggles fought between the Olympic gods and their predecessors. We can say that the god of Greek religions represent authority. Powerful, rich, and dishonest, the Olympians establish a dominant group. Far and distant from human problems, they have the power to make them suffer through extreme punishment, as the elite in metropolis. Frederer himself says, "Do you know what it means to be dismissed by you? It means go below, Father, go below into the depth." Zeus showed the same display of power when imprisoning rebellious gods in the underworld after defeating them in war. Despite this demonstration of strength, Prometheus does not address Zeus with word of remorse. Still, listen to the miseries that beset mankind, how they were witless beforehand, I made them have sense and do it when we reason. I will not speak to upbraid mankind, but to set forth the friendly purpose that inspire my blessing. Yet he must run to the Father present. The pivotal figure of Maria, the female character loved by Freder, is inspired by the Marian tradition. However, her relationship with Prometheus finds no direct evidence in the Greek myth, but we could find a parallelism with the later Promethean tradition. While Prometheus lacked a love interest in the classical record, Romantic authors began to associate him with a female counterpart. Shelley's 1821 lyrical drama Prometheus Unbound introduced the figure of Asia, the god's female companion who became his wife. Thus, Good Maria may be analogous to Asia, reinforcing the notion that Lang and von Harbu were influenced by subsequent adaptation of the myth. On behalf of John Fredersen, who wants to intensify the workers' revolt in order to annihilate them, the scientist and alchemist Rotvang gives his automaton the appearance of Maria, a spiritual guide of Freder's slaves. But the fake Maria will have to replace the real Maria and manipulate the mass of workers into self-destruction. During the experiment, Rotvang transferred Maria's beauty to the machine mensch, creating a figure equal to yet different from the girl, a so-called techno-eilodon. The fake Maria is not the expression of an internal fracture in the main character brain, but on the contrary, she is created ex nihilo by external forces in order to generate rage among the workers. The film does not provide an answer to the question of why the robot is a woman. It takes the machine woman for granted and presents her as almost natural. Thea von Harburg's novel, however, on which the film is based, is quite explicit. In the novel, Rottwang explains why he created a female robot rather than the machine man Fredersen had ordered as replacement of the living labor. Rottwang says, every man creator makes himself a woman. I do not believe the humbug about the first woman being a man. If a male god created the world, then he certainly created woman first. By creating a female android, Rottwang fulfills his male fantasy of a creation without a mother. After Rottwang has brought Maria under his control, he proceeds to deconstruct her. In a complicated chemical and electrical process, he filters her sexuality out of her. So I put in this slide so we can see the fake Maria on the left and the real Maria on the right. So we see the fake Maria dancing and acting as a performer. Instead, the real Maria is preaching, so giving also lecture to the people and also to the children, so symbolizing the motherhood and also the virginity. The figure of the robot or evil Maria is analogous to a character often omitted in contemporary version of the Prometheus myth, Pandora, the all-gifted. Pandora's stories, first described in the Zeus Theogony, is another example of a mythical artificial being. Although much later version of the story portray Pandora as an innocent woman who unknowingly opened a box of evil, Hesiod, the original one, described Pandora as an artificial evil woman who was crafted by Hephaestus and who was ordered by Zeus to descend on Earth and punish humans for discovering fire. Prometheus steals fire from the gods and gives it to men, while Pandora is designed as a technological counterpart of divine fire. She is made with fire, she burns like fire, and she consumes the fire of men. Commissioned by Zeus and fabricated by Hephaestus out of clay and water, this first woman is an entirely manufactured product. She is given a voice, lies, conniving words, activist dispositions, strength, craft, desire, and the mind of a dog. All woman do is steal from the beast. From the other side, Rottwang, the inventor, is a scientist who blends the latest technology with black magic. He's a Faustian man who had become the slave of his creation. He is like Hephaestus, Pandora creator, and lives in a Gothic-style house between skyscrapers. As such, Rottwang represented a cultural other. He is located outside society, neither in the heavens with Fredersen nor with the workers. If at the beginning, Rottwang represents a possible reconciliation between the classes, once the robot is designed to create confusion, this potential is lost. He is prevented from being a mediator because he does not fit into Metropolis' social structure. As written by Thea von Harburg, the screenwriter, this film is not of today or the future, it tells no place. It serves no tendency, party, or class. It has a moral that grows on the understanding, the mediator between brain and muscles, which must be the heart. The same happens with Prometheus characters. Without giving justice nor shame to humans, technology only contributes to violence, requiring Zeus' intervention to right the imbalance. We are arriving to the latest point. So this is, I think that's a really important point because the critics often try to make some point with the female counterpart, so this robotic counterpart, and this point is not quite long discussed. Krakauer, in this famous book on Weimar cinema, From Caligari to Hitler, criticized Lang excess in the creation of mass ornaments, anticipating the same patterns that Nazi propaganda film will use a few years later. Metropolis is no exception and contains elements that will go along with the Nazi Party anti-communist message. Fritz Lang, son of a Jewish woman, was invited into the office of the Nazi Minister of Propaganda, Goebbels, in 1933, who watched films every day and socialized with filmmakers. In the end, the filmmaker fled to the USA 4 months later, making anti-Nazi film, while Thea von Harburg, her ex-wife and former screenwriter, remained in the Reich, writing on the behalf of the regime. The story of Lang's escape from Nazi Germany was constructed as a bit of suspense. Lang says that the departure happened immediately after a meeting with Goebbels, in which the minister asked Lang to take charge of filmmaking for the Nazi regime. After Lang's death, however, facts come out that show that the anecdote was exaggerated and even false. His passport reveals that he went in and out of Germany several times after the date he gave for the crucial final meeting with Goebbels. And there is evidence for earlier meetings with Goebbels, during which Lang seems to have seriously considered working for the Nazis. Even if in the film there is an awareness of class differences, the worker exploitation is resolved through the motto appearing throughout the film: the mediator between the head, the totalitarian authority, and the hands must be the heart. In addition, enslaved work are perceived only as a decorative pattern, reducing the event into an indistinct mass. The director, instead of promoting general equality, behaved brutally towards his 30,000 extras and authors, filming in the freezing cold for long hours, in perilous conditions, with absurd expectation at low pay, as confirmed by Brigitte Helm Maria, who observed that the extras playing the workers might have been actual slaves for all humanity. In the last scene of Metropolis illustrates the beginning of a new order. Freder finally confronts his father. Father, don't you understand? Your city is being destroyed. Your machines have come to life. They are tearing Metropolis to pieces. Why do you allow death to lay his hand upon the city which is your own? The father answers, the city must fall, Freder, so that you may build it upon once more. The mass watches the resolution adopted on one hand by Freder and Maria, which end with a kiss, and on the other, the struggle between the industrial power, Fredersen, and the workers is resolved after some reluctance with a handshake. This happy ending underlines, after the trauma of a military defeat, that a nation only works as its best if united and based on discipline, with a pacified working class. Little cogs and little wheels have their significance too within the production system. So remember once more, Sten von Harburg screenwriter, the mediator between brain and muscle was the heart. Thank you very much for listening.
And thank you for the paper. Well, I always thought that younger scholars needed years to develop their presentation skills, maybe by the time they were 50. But the first two papers show that that's not true at all. You've got all it needs to present material. So very well done.
Thank you.
I'll click on chat.
Okay, so Christine is asking, could we see Rottwang as a Daedalus figure, the scientist who served the regime that enslaved him? And would that highlight further ethical differences between the creator Prometheus and the scientist as a servant to science? Yes, I think that we could see in this way, because Rottwang is a Daedalus figure, but we don't have to forgotten that he is a sort of outcast of society. So he couldn't insert himself in the society, but yes, the scientific part, but live in a sort of catacombs. Quindi, so we can see actually as a Daedalus. Yes, I think so. And regarding the second question, so the creator of Prometheus, the scientist, yes, Rottwang is a servant to science, of course, but he did what he did because we see in the film that he's in love with Maria. So he's trying to create this female counterpart, this robotic counterpart, also to fulfill his sexual desire with this woman. So he can obtain this woman in the real life, and so trying to reproduce this artificially. Thank you.
It's decades since I saw the Fritz Lang film, so you need to refresh my memory. There was a character of mythology who you mentioned in relation to Pandora, who was Hephaestus. And if one's thinking about architecture, which is such an important part of the film, the mythological character at the root of that would not be Prometheus, it would be Hephaestus, and also the Cyclopes, of course, who build cities from
of course,
with building blocks. I wonder whether particularly Hephaestus is made anything of in the Fritz Lang film in the way that Prometheus is. Prometheus principally the creator of people, but Hephaestus, the creator of incidentally artificial people, but also architectural construction.
Yeah, in architectural construction, we see in this film, so architecture has a very biggest part and very important part because we are talking about as European screenwriters, so an European director, and so in Europe there wasn't a skyscraper, so we have this idea of constructing a film, constructing a city, which was born in the USA during a travel. So I think that's thanks also to this film, this cinematic masterpiece, Fritz Lang was trying to construct something else, so something artificial within a film. So in Europe, there wasn't anything about skyscrapers. We was at the beginning. So maybe, yes, he was trying to articulate a different world, a new kind of world as Prometheus. Prometheus stole the fire and gives it to humanity. So we can see some of our artificial...
Does the architecture have a mythical dimension itself, would you say?
So the architects, I think it's in this film, so Prometheus as a creator just of life, so a sort of a cyber natural life, so not maybe the architecture, but just for creating a new kind of life. But why he had to create this life? Because he had to discipline the mass. So I think that's the point. Yes, Rothman creates this female counterpart because he secretly was in love with this girl, but he had a job which has to be done, and the job is to discipline the mass.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's
Thank
go
you.
back to chat.
Okay.
See what else we've got now.
Yeah.
Another point I liked about your paper was how aware you are of a developing tradition, not simply antique and modern,
Yeah.
but I know as a classicist that would come second nature to you, but it's not always noted. And so good for you. I think that worked as well in your paper.
Thank you.
Chat has gone all quiet.
Can we see?
Still got a bit of time.
Yeah.
Any further reflections that you've got yourself, Christiana, about?
I got really interested in this Weimar era construction because this pre-war timing, I think it's quite crucial for Lang, but also for literature, especially for German literature. So also Berlin was like a Babylon of Europe, and we are maybe when we are thinking about 19th or 19th and 20, the era of 20, we are thinking always about the USA, or maybe some literature for American literature, but we don't have to forget that also in Europe in these years, so we have something similar, and especially in Germany. So this Weimar era, this time of decadence, or maybe the quiet before the tempest. So I find it really fascinating. Also
Is your paper part of a larger project now, which you hope to turn into a book or something like that? Or
no, I really like to, but no, I was just really fascinating about the film because it's one of my favorite films of all time, and so I had the chance to maybe extend also my interest with some classical references and everything. So also a bit of German literature, and I think it was just a quite choice to do it.
Okay, well, nothing else has come up on chat, so shall we thank Christiana once more for the paper, and
thank you.
Thank you, and move on now to our third speaker, who is Caterina Sciapatori. She received her BA. Where is Caterina? Is she?
Here I am.
Oh, hi. So she got her BA in English Language and Literature from the English department of the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. She's currently an MA student of the program, The Greek Element in Anglophone Literature, offered by the same department. And there she is in Athens. So her title is, Can We Have a Fire? Tracing the Platonic Myth of Prometheus, so a third bite at the Promethean cherry, tracing the Platonic Myth of Prometheus in Cormac McCarthy's The Road. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Buxton. And before starting, I would like to take a moment to thank all the organizers for giving me the opportunity to be here, albeit remotely, and connect with so many extraordinary people. Okay. In Greek mythology, Prometheus emerges as a trickster figure that employed his intellect to challenge the triadic world hierarchy of gods, men, beasts by trying to reconcile all of its layers. For this reason, he is hailed as the rebellious titan whose intentions are purely philanthropic. For all the benevolence that direct his actions, Prometheus' self-assumed roles as intermediary in the ritualistic institutionalization of sacrifice, as well as firebringer, aim at resolving this problem the hierarchy poses, but exacerbate it instead. In the end, not only does he fail to reconcile the power dynamics between gods and men, but worse, he succeeds in widening the schism between them. By virtue of this backlash, critics such as Jean-Pierre Venand, Karl Kerényi, Jenny Strauss-Clay, and Efimia Karakanza tend to agree that the Titan is in fact an ambiguous figure, especially in the Hesiotic versions of the myth, where the prescience he is named after is nearly disputed. During my research, this ambiguity became the essential ground according to which this paper should be structured and Prometheus' complex character should be examined. Because this ascertainment stressed the need to consider a variety of myths instead of the fire theft incident exclusively, I have chosen to shift my lens from Plato to Hesiod instead, so that my argumentation becomes more expansive as far as its mythological thematic is concerned. That said, this paper proposes that this ambiguity, which characterizes the Hesiotic portrayals of Prometheus, functions as the primary link between the myths and The Road, a science fiction novel published in 2006, in which American author Cormac McCarthy adapts mythology to introduce a post-apocalyptic world. The most profound instance of reproducing the ambiguity traced in the myth is the carrying of the fire, which is gradually established as a mythology and evincing and enclosing Prometheus' presence. The fire, aside from its immediate association to the theft of the divine prerogative, is attributed a dualistic symbolism and hence an equivocality. As J. Ellis points out, there remains a distinction between the fires that have incinerated the earth and the fire carried forward by the father and son, who are the main characters in the story. When fire is employed as a symbol, its metaphorical connotations allude to the human and the humanist condition. On a more literal level, though, it is the materiality of man-made fire that has scorched the planet, providing thus a complementing but opposing meaning to the same motif. Initiating comparative analysis, this presentation intends to bring together McCarthy's novel with the myth of Prometheus, as described particularly in Hesiod's Theogony and his works and Days, which simultaneously oppose, complement, and mutually illuminate each other, so as to trace the above ambiguous role of fire as both enabler and destroyer of humans and the world they inhabit. The archetypal presence of Prometheus is evoked dually in the novel, in the faces of both the father and his little boy. Daniel Luttrell, who has conducted a similar reading, identifies Prometheus and his fire with the father and the son respectively. But if his idea stands, what about compassion? The driving force that led Prometheus to meddle with the divine order, as well as to steal the fire on behalf of the humans, and a quality the father is profoundly deficient in. My understanding instead is that Prometheus is dichotomized into the senex, old man, and poor, young man, obviously embodied by the two characters. This dichotomization echoes not simply the ambiguous duality surrounding the motif of fire, but also the intertextuality of Hesiod's two works. The trickster demigod appears as Prometheus bound in the Theogony and as Pyrphoros in Works and Days, both portrayals interacting with one another. McCarthy optimizes this interaction and repurposes it by fashioning his main characters in like manner. The boy incarnates the fire-giving and the fire-carrying and fire-giving aspects of Prometheus so that he becomes Pyrphoros, God's own fire trick. The boy's innate and innocent kindness distinctively mirror the impulsiveness and short-sightedness of a younger Prometheus, who has the confidence to confront Zeus in a debate performed on purely intellectual grounds, and who is naturally defeated. Moreover, in spite of the thematic discrepancies between the two proems, as Clay calls them, they both underscore Prometheus's repetitious acting, sent to restore the fire to humankind, he carries it in the tube of a fennel. Similarly, because the boy and the man do not make the fire unless its inconspicuousness is ensured, for fear of attracting danger in their path, the boy likewise becomes a secretive Pyrphoros. On the other hand, the anonymous protagonist of the novel dedicates everything to the urgent purpose of preparing his boy to survive alone in a never hostile setting, and is thus relentlessly tormented by and throughout his agon. In short, the man is bound for life by the critical moment he consciously chooses the road and its scarce odds for survival over euthanasia by suicide. To have an opportunity to build a future for his son, the man sacrifices his health. Throughout his adventure, he is often coughing. He bent over, holding his knees. Taste of blood. Every day is a lie, he said. But you are dying. That is not a lie. The blood the man has been already spitting since the first pages of the novel is an index of the sacrifice he has made by letting the agony for his son saturate his very existence. What is more, the recurrence of his coughing fits correspond with Prometheus' punishment by Zeus, according to which a needle fed on his mortal liver, which grew the same amount each way at night as the great bird ate in the course of the day. Although the assaulted organ has been interpreted as deprivation of sexual drive and other passions, I suggest that here its allegorical connotations are redundant, for it simply signifies liver failure, a symptom of which might be coughing blood. The punishment Prometheus receives from Zeus signals the lowest level in his adventure and one of the most important stages of the Campbellian heroic cycle. Like any other hero, Prometheus must go through the belly of the whale, a highly figural topos representing the darkness of the womb and by extension the internal rebirth of the hero. Prometheus's punishment is extremely indicative of the strong image of individual renewal that the metaphor of the belly of the whale tries to convey, because it is an eternal punishment. The man's own passage through the same state occurs when he faces the possibility of losing the boy, the only counterweight worthy of his anguish. The boy becomes indeed his warrant, but not in the sense that he is evidence of God's existence, but in that the man needs him alive so that his bonds can serve a purpose. When the child does become ill, it is crucial that he is struck with fever. The man cupped the boy's forehead in his hand. He was burning. He picked him up and carried him to the fire. It's okay, he said. You're going to be okay. The increase in the boy's body temperature is instantly perceived as a highlighting of his uniqueness to the story. Hereafter, the boy becomes Pyrphoros and is self-appointed as the one who has to worry about everything. Fever is, in essence, the passing on of the fire from the father to the son, the perseverance that permeates the human condition and its ambiguity as it approximates the divine being, and I quote, both external and related to it, unquote. By acquiring access to fire thanks to Prometheus' undertaking to elevate him closer to divinity, man is indeed differentiated from the other animals, yet he cannot be equated to the gods. Therefore, fire becomes a signifier of the human condition itself. Nicole Leroux focuses on the practical utility of this gift when she comments that, with the cooking fire, man awoke to himself, a social creature who cooked his food. No more nectar and ambrosia, yet at least he no longer ate his food raw like the beasts. As long as men have access to the culinary use of fire, the concept of bestiality, which begins with the consumption of uncooked food and finishes up in cannibalism, has no application to the human species. Furthermore, fire enables the establishment of sacrifice as a ritualistic means of communication between the three ranks and sustains the fixed triadic hierarchy. Sacrifice ensures a favorable relationship between gods and men, while it dictates that man is the sacrificer and beast the offering. As a result, on three levels, animal, human, and divine, fire can play a mediating role at the heart of the sacrifice. All these ideas, articulated in relation to Hesiod's double cosmogonic account, resonate in the novel, except that here, the notion of sacrifice is used to shed light only on what makes a human and what makes a beast. Having downplayed the significance of whether God exists, the Road presents a binary system of classifying beings based on their eating habits. This is aptly illustrated in the following dialogue, where the man tries to address his son's concerns on cannibalism, to which many other humans, the only species that survived the apocalypse, have succumbed. We wouldn't ever eat anything, would we? No, no matter what, because we're the good guys, yes, and we're carrying the fire, yes. Okay. Andy Dumont points out that fire is, and I quote, a means of guiding us past the baser instincts that would leave us wallowing in our human nature, end of quote. Any character that does not identify with this dialogue is instantly perceived as a bad guy, a paradoxical state of being in which they may belong to the human species, yet their existence is drained of any humane particle. Even worse, cannibalism is not comprehended as a mere sign of bestiality, but as a process of self-dehumanization, meaning that the position of the cannibal is not just the position of a downgraded human. Rather, the cannibal is established as a perverted, non-human, non-beast, an anthropoid creature with animalistic characteristics that is neither, ergo a monster. Ellie, the stranger the main characters encounter in their adventure, fits into this description. I have not seen a fire in a long time, that's all. I live like an animal. You don't want to know the things I've eaten. When I saw the boy, I thought that I had died. I didn't know what he was. Ellie's inability to name his food and to recognize the boy as a fellow human, a being belonging to the same species as he does, allows us to consider him a cannibal. His reference to fire and his lack of access to it only strengthens this statement. This implicates that the novel pits cannibals against fire carriers, giving informally a name to either existential form of this binary system of classification. The reader is slowly introduced to the notions of cannibalism and human bestiality in the novel, so as to experience the disorientation that the characters feel, being the only ethical inhabitants of a burned world. Interestingly, the first implicit but concrete reference to cannibalism is given through the idea of sacrifice, which of course is closely interconnected with culinary fire. Coming back, the man found the bones and the skin piled together with rocks over them, a pool of guts. He pushed at the bones with the toe of his shoe. They looked to have been boiled. This pile, which comprises of guts and bones, namely of inedible parts, strongly reminds of the settlement at Mykon, where Prometheus had carved up a big ox and served it in such a way as to mislead Zeus, and where the peoples of the earth had burned white bones for the immortals on aromatic altars. But little does the reader know at this point that this pile is neither the remnants of a sacrifice nor the parts of a sacrificed animal in the first place. In fact, this passage becomes fully meaningful much later in one of the most heart-wrenching scenes of the story, where the boy identifies a charred human infant, headless and gutted and blackening on the spit. This macabre image is strikingly tainted by Orphism, which brings up another relevant myth, that of god Dionysus' death by having his flesh boiled and subsequently roasted by the Titans. The convergence of the baby's cannibalization with god Dionysus, apart from underscoring the blatant misuse of fire outside the context of sacrifice, also attributes the godly status to the baby. Granted that the boy too is considered to be the last god on earth by his father, it is indicated that the divine, albeit textually absent, is perhaps only found in childlike innocence, but has no place in a world full of such corruption. In addition, the infant's tender age places further emphasis on the dehumanization of the cannibals and the crossing of the point of no return. Their misuse of fire in cooking human flesh only demonstrates the degeneracy of men all the more. Eventually, cannibals and cannibalized both end up as humans turned beasts, the former owing to their eating habits, and the latter because they are forced to take the offering's position in the ritual of sacrifice. The inability to be both sacrificer and human in the context of being non-cannibal dismisses any ritualism in the sacrificial act and instead debases it to necessitated foraging. No sacrifice is carried out throughout the novel, yet I suggest that the fire carriers, being diametrically opposites of cannibals, do have the potential to revive sacrifice in the sense of initiating a communication that transcends the human condition. Right before the main characters enter the room full of the naked people, the man flicks the lighter and swings the flame out over the darkness like an offering. While the flame signifies the moral rectitude of the two Promethean-like protagonists, it also displays the proper use of fire, perpetually trying to rekindle the bonds between gods and men. The gift of fire is counterbalanced by the gift of procreation through the creation of Pandora, whom Hesiod calls an affliction in both his Theogony and his works of days. Pandora bears a strong resemblance to Prometheus, her indirect creator. Apart from her alluring and thus deceitful looks, Pandora outlines the human condition through her notorious box as ambiguously and as tellingly as Prometheus outlines the human position through his intervention at Nikon. More specifically, the opening of Pandora's box unleashes all of man's grim cares into the world, except for hope, which has stirred a lot of criticism as to why it is trapped in that container of evil in the first place. Unlike Helen van Noorden's interesting answer that the boy contains defenses against evils or apotropaic demons, I believe that hope itself can and should be comprehended as potentially evil because of its illusory nature, hence its inclusion into the box. Clay astutely notes that hope, the ultimate kalon kakon, characterizes the human condition and once again situates us between the ignorance of the beasts and the certain knowledge of the gods, between forethought and hindthought, between Prometheus and Epimetheus. In other words, hope becomes a necessary evil for human existence, since man is thus given the opportunity to question and make assumptions about what he cannot understand due to his limited capabilities. Consequently, hope and its evil necessity become another ambiguous motif which is utilized by McCarthy. But, in contradistinction with the explicit references to Pirferin, Pandora's myth can only be read between the lines in the novel. Early on, the man withdrew his hand slowly and sat looking at the Coca-Cola can. "What is it, Papa?" "It's a treat. For you." The boy took the can. "It's bubbly," he said. In having a taste of the last can of the forgotten drink on earth, the boy instantly fulfills the role of opening Pandora's box at a temporal and geographical reality that can scarcely become worse than it already is. The Coca-Cola can, once the epitome of the decaying Western civilization, is embarrassingly the only specimen of man's great achievements. All human culture and history, liquefied within a Coca-Cola can, is simply, and thence devastatingly, rejected on account of its bubbly taste by the next generation that never came to know it. Occasioned by this, we may wonder, is there an implication of conviction as regards the human condition's degeneracy? Or could there be a hope for it after all? In any case, it is certain that McCarthy relies on the mythopoetic charts inscribed in both fire and hope to create a metaphor for the human self. Strikingly, fire and hope converge owing to their ambiguous duality in the same way that Prometheus converges with Pandora on the same ground. To hope for a future is to carry the fire, and to carry the fire is to exemplify and to salvage the human essence, the spark of life, eclipsing from a world recited by cannibals. Soon, this teaching becomes the core of the novel, and the son asks, "We are going to be okay, aren't we, Papa?" "Yes, we are. And nothing bad is going to happen to us." "That's right, because we are carrying the fire." "Yes, because we are carrying the fire." The boy uses the same metaphor repeatedly to express his hopefulness for the future, as well as to establish himself as a non-cannibal, so that the above metaphor illustrates the ways in which he is signified as a human being differentiated from the beasts. Similarly, the man's farewell prompt toward his son to sustain the fire which burns inside him because he will be lucky again is not merely the completion of a crucial parental teaching. Rather, it is the articulation of the dying parent's hope, be it a foresight or an illusion, that his sacrifice will amount to something. Because of the novel's open ending, it is difficult to conclude whether the man's hopes are realized, even though the boy is shown being saved from without by an unknown man and his family, who emerge as Deus ex machina, like another Hercules coming to liberate Prometheus. The boon the hero has to bestow is the realization that the gift of Prometheus showcases the human condition manifested in the expectation of the boy's innate goodness and the necessity of the father's personal suffering, the fire, hope, and their ambiguousness. But this boon may quickly be rationalized into non-entity, as Campbell notes, in the case that it is appropriated and contaminated by the cannibals, who are constantly a hovering threat. Nevertheless, even if the coexistence of the two children and the two sexes at the end does not ensure the continuation of the human condition, the fire of the novel has already been passed on. Indeed, by the end, the novel's affective power makes the reader hopeful that the boy will somehow survive with the help of his new nuclear family. Consequently, McCarthy tests our humanity based on whether he has stirred up hopes while teaching us how to be a bit more human by passing the fire on to us. Thank you very much. And here you can find my geography list.
Thank you so much, Katerina. Well, another elegant, well-informed and thoughtful paper. How lucky we all are this morning. I certainly, so easy to moderate things like this. It just moderates itself. Let me click on chat. Okay, while we're waiting, can I ask you something? Again, it's, as usual, a product of my ignorance, Katerina, about the work of your novelist. To what extent, when you're finding lots of layers in McCarthy's work, you're finding Plato, you're finding Aeschylus, you're finding Hesiod, you're finding the work of scholars such as Nicole Laurent, Detienne, Joseph Campbell, to what extent is that you as the scholar identifying these possibilities, varying meanings within the novel, and to what extent is McCarthy consciously using, aware of, multi-layered traditions? I know it's in a way an unreal dichotomy, but I think there's something to it all the same. Could you maybe respond to that?
But this is a brilliant question. Thank you very much, Professor Buxton. I don't think, even though I haven't had the chance to explore any of other works by McCarthy, I don't think that he consciously aims to delve so deeply into the archetypal themes that I have included in this presentation. Personally, I have used prominent scholars' work in order to try and find between the lines these ideas. So I have used them as a premise to try and offer a new analysis, because I don't think that a lot of scholars have actually identified Prometheus in The Road, in this particular novel, but I don't think that any of them have analyzed it so far in relation to Hesiod's portrayals of Prometheus myth.
So there's nothing in the biography of McCarthy or interviews, anything like that? Obviously, the intention of an author doesn't limit, doesn't restrict what a reader can read into it, but it's also, I mean, it's a part of informing ourselves about the nature of his writing, isn't it?
As far as I'm aware, he hasn't mentioned anything about Prometheus or the fire that is being carried, but I'm sure that at least to a certain extent, he subconsciously perhaps borrows the theme of carrying the fire, because it's quite prevalent in mythology, and tries to integrate it into his work.
Yes, thank you very much. We have a chat from Christina Doku, who is obviously sustaining the weight of chat on her shoulders like Atlas sustained the world. And the comment is this: you identified the Pandora part with the Coca-Cola, but I was wondering what you make of the role of the man's wife, the boy's mother, as well as the pregnant enslaved women in the story.
That's a very interesting question.
That's self-explanatory to you, but to those of us who haven't read the novel, maybe not so much. Give us a bit of background, and then.
Okay, so we have the opportunity to know through flashbacks that the man's wife has chosen very consciously to kill herself over trying to survive in this dystopian world, because she's threatened by cannibals all the time, so she doesn't want to be eaten, consumed, and burned. And in contrast to her, there are we can see one pregnant woman from a distance who has joined other cannibals, and we are given the impression that the burned infant that the protagonists encounter at some point is supposed to be her newborn baby. Of course, there are not explicit references of this connection, only implicitly. So let me read the question again, please.
Yeah. Shall I read that? I'll read it slowly, and then we got plenty of time. You identified the Pandora part with the Coca-Cola, but I was wondering what you make of the role of the man's wife, the boy's mother, as well as the pregnant enslaved women in the story.
To be frank, I don't see any immediate connection coming to mind right now. I think that, his wife serves as, I don't know, as a diametric opposite to the man, as a counterpart, because she chooses the easy solution, which is to die and abandon her child, instead of trying to survive under these very extreme circumstances. So I don't think that Pandora's presence is very explicitly portrayed in the novel, but I have used the idea of the Pandora's box in order to highlight the theme of hope, which hovers in the novel.
Mm.
Unless, of course, we are to identify Pandora with the catastrophe that has happened, on which we don't have much information.
Mm. Jolly good. Thank you very much.
I have a question as well.
Oh, good. Yeah,
First
excellent.
of all,
Because
I would like to congratulate you for this presentation and for your analysis, because it was very sophisticated. So during your presentation, you said at that point, at some point, that no sacrifice takes place within the novel. But I was wondering, would you see the father's death as a kind of sacrifice, like as a ritual act that offers his son the opportunity to survive, like an appeasing act, like something that takes place and appeases the gods in the novel, so the boy can move on with his life? And perhaps you could, perhaps, I don't know the background of, I didn't know the background of the novel as well, but perhaps between the sacrifice of the mother and the sacrifice of the father, would you find a connection between them?
Thank you for your question, Eva. This is actually very interesting. I don't find any sacrifice in the mother, because she is doing what is best for herself. She abandons her son, as I said before. So I very distinctly separate the man's sacrifice for his son, which I identify as a constant torture. That's why I have likened it to the eagle torture that Prometheus bound experiences, from the ritual sacrifice that is supposed to be a means to communicate with the divine, with the god, who is textually absent in the novel. So yes, of course, I believe that the father is making a sacrifice to try and protect his son at all costs, and to prepare him to survive alone in this very unfriendly environment. But I don't see any ritualism in his sacrifice. It's something that a parent would do.
nice that Evanthea came in there. I just wonder whether Christiana, another of our Prometheus experts, you've got anything you want to chip in here, or just leave it at that, whatever you like.
No, I just find really interesting your presentation, so thank you for it. Just wondering about this fire, because the theme, the motive of fires is recurrent around classic literature, so Latin literature, Greek literature, and it's quite interesting that you use this theme for this presentation. I just wondering, as Evanthea said before, so the sacrifice of the father, but you already answered to this question, so thank you.
Thank you.
Good, excellent. Well, it's nice that we have some interchange between our three Prometheus experts. Time to move on. In a way, Prometheus is associated with beginnings, but Tony, I think, is going to take us towards the end of everything.
Yes, somewhat, yes.
Okay, hello, Tony. Right, so our final speaker, alas, we have to come to the end, but it's Tony, a doctoral student at the Department of Cultures in the University of Helsinki, specializing in modern mythologies. He's working full-time on a 4-year dissertation entitled End of the World Narratives in Mythic Modernity. Wow, what a subject, particularly these days. And his title is Post-Human Conflict in Jeff van der Meer's The Southern Reach Trilogy and the Film Annihilation. So set up your PowerPoint, Tony, and over to you.
Yes, you should be able to see that now, I guess. Is it okay? So, can you see the screen and the changing of the slides? Hello?
Looks good from here.
Okay, great. So yeah, I guess it's okay then. Yeah. So hi, as Professor Buxton said, yes, I'm from the University of Helsinki and working on a dissertation concerning end of the world narratives and discourses in modernity or mythic modernity. I'm still kind of thinking about the title, but yeah. Anyway, it concerns narratives about end of the world and eschatologies in the modern age, mostly dealing with the texts of the late modernity. So basically that I define here as the period following the Second World War. My main focus is on what could be called this myth of modernity. And I sort of here I combine myth and folklore studies with areas such as sociology and studies of religion and even with post-human philosophy, and all that such a broad term encompasses. And of course, this also includes some ecological thought, since we really can't talk about the end of the world in the late modernity without considering global warming and the 6th mass extinction and other events such as that endanger our biosphere. And these changes are often associated with the idea of the Anthropocene, where humankind has enormous power to change its environment, but doesn't really have a sort of control over it anymore. So we are slipping into a dangerous territory here. And I'm going to chart this this territory and my perspectives on myths and modernity and post-human thought by contrasting 2 pieces of work. And first of them is a book trilogy written by Jeff van der Meer. Usually it's called The Southern Reach, but there's also this collection with all the 3 books that's in 1 volume, and that's the one I'm going to be using here. So these are the page numbers. And this book includes basically 3 titles. They are Annihilation, Authority, and Acceptance. And then the second work that I analyze is a movie directed by Alex Garland, and it's loosely based on the first book called Annihilation as well. So to make matters simple, I'll just refer to either Annihilation the book or Annihilation the movie to separate these. And this paper will be about a difference between these 2 works. A difference that I think characterizes a gap in thinking about how humankind is situated in relation to the world, to non-humans. I have some issues with the movie, but I do still acknowledge that Garland did not actually set about to create a faithful adaptation or anything like that. He has said that this is more, this is his vision, and it's more like a dream based on a dream. And so I won't be making any guesses about Garland's underlying philosophies here either, or whether he succeeded or failed in what he was doing. Just that his vision is not nearly as complicated or post-human oriented as van der Meer's was. And that's what I will then elaborate on here. And I will sort of this is something that will be connected to many of the earlier presentations here, but perhaps this perspective is somewhat different. And there will be sort of a Prometheus here as well, but completely indirectly. First of all, however, some words concerning myths. My definition here is based mostly on the one presented by William Doty in his huge mythography from year 2000. This is the second edition. And the definition, it's long, as you can see, but what I consider important are the parts highlighted here. So that a mythological corpus consists of texts that are culturally important, and they're stories full of metaphoric and imaginal content. And this way they describe these foundational accounts of what our experiences are and what is our role relative to the world. Now, if we look at either of the works here that I'll discuss here, you know that they are, of course, they are cultural products, they are fiction. And I don't include foundationality in that they aren't foundational as such, as you'd expect to find in pre-modern myths, for example, that explain how the world was created. But I consider foundationality to mean a larger ordering of things and what the roots of this order are. So why things have taken certain shape that we notice in our lives. And most of all, what we believe to be important for our world to go on and not to end. And this will be sort of crucial when I'll analyze these two narratives. So manifestations of myths in science fiction and sci-fi sort of as mythological thinking means for me that these stories are singular formations of these long-lasting narrativized narrated worldviews, and they rely on these mythical models that we have internalized more or less. But they also contribute emerging ways of looking at the world and what our roles in the world are. Before getting into these two annihilations, first I'd like to tell you about what I consider these mythologies that I'm talking about. I mean the sort of underlying worldviews and thought structures that are then being represented in, for example, in these sci-fi stories. The first one is the product of modernity as such, following the Age of Enlightenment. It's a vision, sort of a progression, mostly European vision that considers science and rationality as the tools to control the natural world, even to subvert it, to bring it into order by human hand. And this story tells us of a Western civilization as a sort of the pinnacle of human progress. And as we know, this idea mattered greatly in the horrors of the colonial age and the othering of indigenous peoples, for example. And also in our the modern contempt towards myths that is still present everywhere in society. When someone says that it's just a myth, it's something untrue. And of course, without going into detail here, this idea of progress and constant growth and stuff like that has also contributed in no small amount to the ongoing climate crisis. And at the same time, our progress has also enabled us to define this as the age of the Anthropocene, which means that humankind has become a sort of defining power in the world, a force of nature itself. This term can be contested, but I do consider it valuable since, as you may know, it is based on geological layers, that humankind has left a geological layer. And I think that carries important symbolism about how the distinction between humans and Earth itself is blurred. And this such a counterattack of blurring boundaries has been mounted against this modern myth of glorious human futures and exploitable nature. So a new form of thought has begun to take hold, and it's this post-human idea of leaving the human-centered vision behind and embracing a larger world of continuous connections between humans and non-humans in order to eradicate a sort of dichotomy of nature and culture, or subject and object as separate entities. And this is a view that can't be simply categorized as post-human, since some of the thinkers do not accept that title, but I'll just use it here just as a useful shorthand in this case. And what I mean with this term is the philosophies of, for example, new materialism, dark ecology, speculative realism, object-oriented ontology, and even new animism, and philosophers such as Bruno Latour and Timothy Morton and Donna Haraway, and the others mentioned here are the ones I'm talking about. And in fiction, this means the new weird movement, which includes Jeff Vandermeer as well, as one of the writers who engages with these matters. These two are now, I think, modernity and post-humanity are sort of two views of humanity in relation to the world that I consider the basis for these two distinct mythologies as such. They might in some ways blend, but mostly they are in stark opposition with each other. Whereas the first one is still placing humanity in the center of the stories and not othering nature. So nature is moved outside the regulated culture area, where it's either a threat or something to be used. And then the second vision is the sort of dethroning of humanity by imagining speculative alternatives and new kinds of networks that also require new sorts of thinking and base narratives, as Donna Haraway argues here, to replace the one where a human subject overcomes nature after a bloody battle. So as these new philosophers like Morton and Latour as well argue, the continuous myth of that the moderns cultivate is what will most likely be very dangerous to us. So we must somehow change the story. And now it's time to look at these sci-fi stories and what they do in this framework. First of all are the books by Jeff Vandermeer. They are closely tied with this post-human or weird ecological mode of thinking. To shortly summarize, the central idea of the books is that something has happened, and a new and an unpredictable form of nature has appeared in the southern parts of the USA. And there's a nefarious human organization called the Southern Reach, and they try desperately to unlock the mysteries of this site called Area X in the books. And in the book Annihilation, we follow an unnamed biologist as she enters this area with a group of other unnamed scientists. So here's already one way to upset our expectations, since usually we are used to stories with characters who have names and also personal histories. Personal histories are missing as well. Only the protagonist actually has a past in this story. We don't know anything about any others. And of course, everything goes wrong in the mission. But the point is that in the books, the human attempts to colonize this area fail totally. It's more like the Area X colonizing them, which is then constantly underlined by Vandermeer in his story. So there, for example, there are remains of human buildings and tools and such still in the area, but they have been taken over and transformed into unlikely organisms. And this is what happens to all the human beings as well who are in contact with Area X. In the books, the biologist, as our viewpoint character, does not lose anything. She does not win anything either. More like it's that she blends into this new ecosystem. She goes through a transformation and turns into something else entirely, and begins to resemble those other human beings who have turned into animals or plants or something like that. Her victory is in the fact that she accepts it. And this is the basic idea of the entire series, that no matter what we do with our science or organizations or technology, Area X is still unknowable. It cannot be beaten as such. It can just be accepted. The border that separates this area from the rest of the planet, it's expanding as the plot progresses, but it's never really seen as an enemy, although it is slowly colonizing the world. It's seen only as an enemy only by those characters who are portrayed as sort of caricatures of the modern people. So the people in the Southern Reach organization who try to control and rule everything. The main characters learn that the area is basically just an eternal transformation, quite similar to nature itself. And you really can't fight nature in this scenario. Plus, the trilogy, it's truly weird in the sense that we encounter all kinds of climaxes, but the resolutions are mostly personal things of attuning with this ecosystem, not revealing its secrets entirely or saving the world. So there's no great fight in the end, just attempts to live as part of the process. And in the end, this process is what presumably takes over the entire world. Now, looking at Annihilation, the movie, we see a different story. First of all, we are given an underlined cancer metaphor in this thing. First image, the one on the left corner, is from the beginning of the film that depicts an actual tumor. The second is from the climax, where the monster of this area, which is called Shimmer in the movie, is presented as a sort of tumor that grows within a planet here. And it's not evil as such, but it's still something that must be destroyed in order for the body to survive. So in the books, the threat was more existential, and it threatened our thinking. In the movie, the threat is mostly physical. One that tells of an opponent that captures space and captures human bodies, like perhaps in the classic film Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So horror is the more dominant theme here, although there are beautiful images such as this. Anyway, we see this idea of a fight reflected in the structure and the actual events in everywhere in the movie. So what Alex Garland wrote is sort of a story of a character played by Natalie Portman. She's a hero figure, a resourceful old soldier who just happened to become a biologist as well. And she enters the area, she fights it. As you can see, she's also a soldier, so she shoots at things and she kills monsters to survive. And at all points, she also saves her friends. Ultimately, this center of this area is located and it's destroyed with fire. So humans are more like the saviors of the planet than a threat themselves. And this structure it's of course it's old. It's the basic plot of almost all such sci-fi horror action in Hollywood. So it includes a progression towards a climax where our protagonist actually faces this personified being. It doesn't have a face as such, but as you can see, it's in strict opposition with her. It encounters her and it's a threat, and only by being clever enough, our exceptional human being manages to possibly win. And there's some ambiguous material here, whether the main character actually survives or then it's her copy, the one seen here, that actually lives. But either way, it doesn't really matter because they still fight for dominion here. So there's more othering happening here than in the books. And it resembles other sci-fi horror films, where nature is sort of an enemy and the extraterrestrial monster is something attacking humanity, which means human beings have no reason to basically question anything about themselves or their relation to the environment. They are being invaded and then defend themselves. So there's no mention of climate change or anything directly in this movie, while this material figures heavily in the book series. And in that context, in the books, it feels like the Area X might be the thing that saves Earth from humans, while this message is entirely absent in the film. Shimmer is just unknowable. And in the books, the biologist, she has lost her husband to Area X, but the man is dead in that story, and their relationship wasn't that good either. So the biologist has basically just joined the expedition to find out what happened, and she realizes that she enjoys the place, even though it is dangerous. While in the movie Annihilation, the biologist's husband is considered alive, but dying because of a contamination from the Shimmer area. So she basically ventures there to save him, to save another human being that she's heavily invested in. So she never really has any motives to merge in any way with this nature. It's something still to be won. It likely contaminates and thus changes her too, but she never really makes that choice herself. So there's still the separation of human mind and Shimmer there till the end, which resembles the nature-culture divide, which is one of the main building blocks in the myth of modernity, as argued by post-humanists who oppose such differentiations. There are other conflicting events in these works as well, but I can't really go on to single them out here. But anyway, this is the central idea that the book series elaborates on this new mythology of humans not being center to the functioning of the world or its inheritors. They are still the main characters, but even they have to adapt to Area X, and they constantly need to adapt themselves. While their so-called culture here begins to naturalize in a way, as a sort of demonstration of Bruno Latour's action network theory, for example. So we move away from humans affecting the world to a more complex relationship in the books. Yet Alex Garland's vision, on the other hand, is still a vision that is constructed as a struggle, where human beings are the main characters and sort of the heroes who are being challenged by outside forces. And then they fight the horrors, even with great personal cost. And they either save the day for humankind, or then they are killed and replaced, but there's no like acceptance for human beings in this new situation. So what I argue is that these two works clearly demonstrate the junction where we are at in terms of thinking about our foundational beliefs in what our relationship with the world is. So the old vision sees human exceptionalism as the force that keeps this world going, not ending, basically. So it's a fight against these invasive non-humans. Perhaps a desperate fight, but anyway, a fight. While the post-human vision, which is depicted in Vandermeer's trilogy, sees this human hubris as a futile or self-destructive in a sense. And the old version it's easy to visualize in a movie with action and good guys and bad guys, while the post-human view is complicated, as Timothy Morton here says, and it's hard to really turn into a recognizable story format. But then again, that is exactly what example Haraway argued for, that it matters what stories we use to tell stories. And I'd call these deeper level stories, perhaps like the deep models of storytelling. They could be either called metatexts or just as well myths, in my opinion. So these sci-fi works are basically like projections of these narratives that we have integrated or are trying to integrate into our thinking. So the myth of modernity, first of all, a battle narrated explicitly in the film, and then the myth of a difficult, even fatal coexistence, as represented in Vandermeer's books. And this fatal coexistence means sort of staying with the trouble, which is also the title of Haraway's book. So staying with this idea of Area X and making a new kin out of it, sort of, out of something that we don't understand and that might kill us. And I think it's in my opinion, it's one of the core functions of both science fiction and myths, as presented here in all these other wonderful papers, that we need to imagine such ideals and alternatives for us to prepare for this strange new life that will happen to us. And we need to think of ways for our world to continue and not to end. And this is what both of these works do, but in a quite different way. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Well, if a good work of scholarship is something that combines asking really big questions with tying it into small details, I think your paper really qualifies as a good work of scholarship. So thank you very much.
Yes.
No chats have come through so far. Can I just ask you this? Your overall project is about end of the world narratives in mythic modernity. And I'm naturally thinking of Norse mythology, Twilight of the Gods and all that. Yeah. But how far does your present paper, the one you've just given us, tie in with that global project that you're interested in? Is it a part of it or is it aside from it?
Yes, it's sort of a side project, but I also think that it's necessary to, since we are so swallowed in pop culture and all these speculative fictions, I think it's really important to consider their meaning and what their effect is on our thinking. So I think yes, I think it's important to look at fiction such as this, but it will be like a small part of my work. I will also consider other areas of modernity outside the immediate pop culture sphere as well. But yeah, post-humanity will be something, I guess, that will be perhaps in the end of my dissertation. It will be something that I will consider sort of as the perhaps the next alternative before first of all I list all the other sort of narratives that are competing.
Yeah. Going into chat now, I see a comment from where are we?
Yes, I can.
Metka, I see. I'm glad you combined ecology at the end of the world transformation, and you brought in eschatology, which echoed my apocalypse as I see it in Wenders.
Yes, that was really interesting. The Wenders paper, because it's so well somehow it fitted my ideas here as well. I guess there was another question from Christina as well.
Let me go into that again. Yes, I see. Within the post-human schema, what would be the metaphorical symbolic value of the shimmer itself as a phenomenon? And does the shimmer acquire a different value if we shift our schema to the modernist one?
Yeah, I think the Shimmer is the name of the thing in the movie, and Area X is the one in the books, but I think they are sort of compatible, so I'll just think of both of them here. I think the area is sort of the Area X or Shimmer. It's really the symbolic value is this nature we really can't control in any way. It's similar to a lot of earlier sort of zones that are unknowable to human beings. One of Jeff Vandermeer's inspirations was it's greatly based on the idea of the zone in Andrei Tarkovsky's Stalker, as well as the book which that is based on, which is the Roadside Picnic, because there's already by the Strugatsky brothers. So there's already this idea of an area that is somehow out of our control. So it's basically, it's symbolic of all that we don't know and can't control.
Anything that the rest of us should know about Vandermeer that you didn't mention in your paper that would be relevant or would lead us on to more mythological understanding?
Yeah, I don't think he uses that much mythology as such as a re-modern mythemes or anything like that. But he's definitely one of the core writers of this new weird movement, where the point is sort of to upset the expectations. In my opinion, it's based a lot on creating worlds where things combine in somewhat surreal ways that can't be understood. So I think it's sort of an project of like creating new symbols in a way, creating new metaphors, definitely creating new metaphors.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one interesting factor that could be mentioned here about Vandermeer. It's that the idea that he got this idea for this Area X or Shimmer from reading about an oil leakage in the ocean near where he used to live, and he was kind of upset about that. He was really shaken by that happening, and so he started thinking about like an inverse oil spill, where it's not that humans are doing something to nature, but that there's something that begins to spill to the human area of life and culture and stuff like that.
Any thoughts on Tony's paper from Katerina or Evanthea or Christiana?
Actually, I have a question. I'm not sure. I was wondering whether you think that the shimmer, like the word refers to wavering light. So I was wondering, would you connect the shimmer with the fire or the lightning in many mythologies? They're like, they symbolize knowledge. And if the shimmer symbolizes the knowledge as well, and it's threatening humanity, what does that mean within the context of the movie? That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, first of all, one important interesting thing as well is that the light it's in a really big role in the book series, which is sort of interesting in that mythological context, that the light is something that sort of happens to human beings as they slowly begin to change in that area. But in the movie, the title Shimmer, there's a part where a character talks about this area Shimmer being something that like reflects everything, and that's sort of the idea I think that Alex Garland brought into this concept, that things begin to change because they are sort of reflected, or maybe that the nature in that sense, the weird nature over there begins to reflect on all human beings there. But I don't think there's any clear connection to light in the movie as such. So it's basically the shimmer is that weird effect where it sort of shines with these strange colors, and I don't really think there's anything about knowledge in that sense in the movie.
Good. Anything from? Oh, sorry. Come back, Avanthea, if you want.
No, I just wanted to thank him, and also congratulations. It was a bit abrupt my question before.
Yeah.
I'd like to, in general, I'd like to thank. I didn't have time for that in the beginning, but I'd like to thank you all and this wonderful conference for having a lot of interesting papers.
Well, I think we can all echo that. And what strikes me is how nice it would be if the four of you exchange emails and keep in touch, because it seems to me that you have a lot of ideas which will feed off each other, and each of you can learn from the other. That's why it's been such a pleasure to be presiding over this, because, as I say, it's been so easy. You've made the thing work well yourselves. We hope the audience has felt the same. Oh, hang on, we've got another chat. We've just about got time to squeeze that in. This is from Leon Burnett now, okay? As I commented on an earlier paper on annihilation at this conference, roadside picnic and stalker seem to be a subtext, but what about J.G. Ballard's novels like The Drowned World and The Wind from Nowhere?
So far what I know about the roots of this entire new weird movement, I guess it's really heavily indebted to Ballard, as he was sort of a proto new weird writer. I personally haven't read either of those works, although I do have The Drowned World as a book. I still haven't gotten to it, but yes, I'm sure that sort of the way I understand Ballard is that there are a lot of sort of these narrative strategies that he uses where he sort of confuses how the narrative should go in our usual expectations. But yeah, I can't comment exactly because I haven't read those.
Very good. Okay, I think that brings us pretty well to the end of things now. As I say, keep in touch with each other, exchange your ideas. You're a credit to the profession, and all the best and keep safe. And we can hand back to Antonella now and sign off and go and have some lunch.
Thank you very much, Professor Buxton, for moderating this really fascinating session. I really enjoyed it too. And thank you to all our speakers, Tony, Katerina, Evanthea, Christiana, and of course to our listeners and commentators, Metka Tupancic, Leon Barnett, and Christina Doku. We will continue these themes also this afternoon. So I hope you will join us then. And thank you very much again. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.